Hello, John Roat.
Sonny Freeman. Good to be here in this crawfish world.
Yes, sir.
Uh, I agree with you 100% on the basics of physics. That's the basics. That's the only thing these young people got. When they come into the business, it was the same for us. Physics. The partial pressures, all those things they got to know. How they live in the business. That thing you said about money.
Yep.
The first time I heard about it, two SEAL team guys came back.
Which y'all didn't make a lot of money doing what you
No,
did.
no.
That was very, very dangerous.
I thought, my God, man, you're paying me to do this. I love it, you know.
Yeah.
But the thing that it was $1,000 a day in stat at the time, and a lot of things. And the thing that stuck in my mind is they were paying $7.50 an hour to the guy that held the hose.
Yep. Yeah.
What the hell, man?
Yep.
That's more money than I ever made in my life. $7.50
Exactly
an hour,
right.
You know. And when I decided to get out, I went, well, I'll go look into that. Navy paid for dive
Right.
school. I'd been through second class school. I knew I didn't have to go,
Right.
but I wanted to find out about this business.
Well, you know, I think the commercial industry, there was a lot of commonalities between the military and the commercial industry because basically when you make your living on the water and you jump in there and you get over 100 foot, you've got to trust the people topside to get you back up. We all talk about free ascents and what we'll do if we run out of air and have to ditch the hat and all. But once you pass 100 foot, there are very few people that could make it to the surface. So you're totally relying on the team that you have with us. Same thing as the military. You know, when you're going into areas you shouldn't be in, you trust the guy next to you. You got to trust. And that's the commonality, I think, the commercial industry and the diving business that we all shared together is you've got to have a team of people go out there and address the project as a unit, and all. So it was always interesting because of the challenge of what we did.
The thing I found out when I didn't think I was made to supervise.
Right.
Paul Perry made me do it. And I said, okay, as long as I can dive. And all up till 76, I dove in supervised both.
Exactly. My whole career, that's what we did.
A couple superintendent jobs, but I hated that.
Right.
job.
Yep.
Superintendent sucked.
And I guess it's now the superintendents don't even dive anymore, do they? I've lost track of it, but it was headed in that direction.
In the North Sea for a while, and I don't know if they're still doing it with IMCA, you didn't even have to have dive experience, be a diver to be a super. They called it the person in charge. They had some little acronym they made up for it.
Right.
So you could be superintendent, and you were telling the supervisors what to do that knew what to do, but they had to follow your.
There's something about that this coon ass don't agree with.
No, a lot of things that I don't like at all.
Yeah.
But when I talk with these students down here at the school, I stress that. Look, you're brought up different. The whole world is different for you than it was for me and the guys that come before you. Except that physics and the basics and the guy being able to trust that you're going to run that chamber. You're going to make sure when you look in that porthole, you've got the mask on.
Right.
You're going to vent that chamber with the table calls to.
You are the responsible party taking care of the guy making the ride inside.
That's right. You don't need to be half the deck down watching his gear. If you've got to watch his gear, do it after he gets out. If you got the bucket right there by you, you can wash some and look in the porthole and check it, fine.
You know, John, that's one thing. You staying involved in doing things like that. I guess when I got out, I got out. And I often talk to people that have made their career in the industry that are still involved in various parts of it, like yourself. And I think that is really a selfless act on y'all's part because, you know, everybody talks about how different things are today, and they are different, no doubt about it. But I think it's very important for people to understand how far the industry has come and the people before them, what they've done, what they've not done, both good and bad,
What we
and
learned the
everything.
hard way.
Exactly. And that's the way you make improvements and all. Whether they was as good as the old timers or better than the old timers, I don't really know. But I just think it's a key element, and I've done a terrible job with that, of talking about it to people still involved in the industry that are just starting out. But there's a lot to be had by talking to people like you.
I got a question.
Okay, this ought to
I
be
believe
good with our
when
path.
I started,
Uh-huh.
there were a whole bunch of guys diving that did not belong in the bathroom like
True
I
enough.
honestly believe it.
Well, that was
scared
mostly
me.
guys that was in it for the money versus the thrill of getting the job done. I found that was the big difference of people back then,
And didn't question nothing. As long as
Yeah.
they had air, everything's good.
right?
And then when things turn bad, uh-oh.
That wasn't the guy you wanted coming to get you, for sure.
Yeah, I always, you know Larry Tomlinson, right?
Know Larry very well. I'm a little disappointed he ain't here today.
I am too. I love Larry.
Yeah.
I dove with him at Taylor and at Santa Fe. And if I had to pick a standby diver when things might go bad, I would pick Larry because Larry would eat steel to get you. You know.
Yeah.
Now, as a diving company owner, he was one cheap sucker. Yeah.
You know, I bought Larry's company. Did you know that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I wound up buying professional divers from Larry, and that was an interesting experience going through that process with Larry, because as good of a diver as he was one of the most paranoid guys I know. I had to go look at his shop and equipment. That was midnight.
When I came to work for Santa Fe,
Yeah.
Larry, I started what they called safety meetings at
Yeah.
Taylor, you know, which
Right.
you know what they were. As a tender, I got up and said stuff, and people would go, they didn't want to sit by me.
Yeah.
Bob McCardle, I was his frogman, and he loved me, so I didn't get fired, right? But I went to work for Santa Fe, come back from the North Sea, and Larry was working there. And he got me aside and he said, John, look, the company requires you to come, if you're in, they have a safety meeting every week. And everybody that's on shore is required to come to that safety meeting. I said, okay. He said, but look, I know you. You will lose your job quick if you say anything.
We're going to
bad.
put a muzzle on you, John.
Don't say anything.
Yeah.
Tell them you don't have an opinion.
Did you tell him that was an impossibility, John?
I actually did it for a year.
Wow.
I
Wow.
actually did it for a year. And we had a real close incident, and we were having a safety meeting right after. Nobody died on that one, you know, but they come close.
It was time to say something.
And, well, I'm not going to say his name, but he was running the company. And
Right.
he's at that meeting, and he's bringing the whole incident up and saying blah, blah, blah. And he looked at me and he said, John, you haven't said anything in any of these safety meetings. What? I said, you don't want to hear what I got to say. He said, yeah, I want to hear it. And I said, no, you don't want to hear what I got to say.
Because you were brutally honest, one way or another. Like it or not, you were brutally honest.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
you know.
It's the only way to be.
That's the only way
Yeah.
It's life or death to me.
Yeah.
And I ain't killing some sucker for a deep pocket
Yeah.
oil company.
Right.
You know? So, he said it one more time, so I stood up and I told him just exactly what I thought of what went on, how stupid it was. We all knew it was stupid and it did it anyway.
Right.
So he didn't fire me right then. But the next day, I got a call, hey, would I come back down? Well, I was living up in Gretna, you know. Would I come back down for a meeting with him, and he wanted to talk with me more about this incident. Okay. So I drive down there, and we go in his office, and there's this other guy sitting there I ain't never seen before. And he starts to ask me what I think, and I asked him who this guy is. Well, he's a company lawyer.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I said, I'm going to tell you what, you take that lawyer and you shove him up the yin-yang where the sun don't fucking shine, and I quit. And left. You know, because I knew the business by then. I had him and now Ken Wallace that hated me with a passion.
And
I
the
was
him you're
proud
talking
of
about
it.
was one of the most political guys I've ever worked with.
Who-
The guy that we're not calling his
we're
name.
not saying his name. Oh, yeah.
He was very political.
Oh, very, very true. And I think the business is better now than it was in those years. I think, sure, there's the politics, but they don't call people safety officers anymore because the safety officers back in the day got such bad reputation for being keeping lawsuits off people's backs.
You know the problem I have with that statement, and it's not a problem with the industry as much as just human behavior, John. You know, you're old and I'm old, and we grew up in part of the industry that you was only as good as the last dive you made, and you didn't want a bad reputation to be a bad diver, so you planned the dive, you got things ready, you put a lot into it to make it a good dive and all, and you didn't use excuses on why it went bad or whatever. You held yourself accountable and responsible. Was we as safe as things have gotten today? And the problem and the fine line that I think, and I really hate talking about this to a degree because, you know, the industry has lost several people that were trying to do a good job and made a mistake underwater and paid the ultimate price. And we all have, you know, and it's just the way it is. But the fact is we're professionals. We're hard to be professional. We knew our craft, and they were paying us to do one thing: produce. And I don't really know how to say it that it doesn't sound wrong, but there was a lot of people in my latter years in the industry that were getting into it that kind of used safety as a protectional hide behind versus putting the effort in to go down and do a good job and all. And I had a hard time with that because I thought professional divers got paid the money we did, which was always above average pay scale, what we made. And it's a risky business. But you were the professional that knew how to do it and performed the best of your ability to do it as fast and safe as you could do it, but not use safety as a shield because you didn't like what you had to go down to do next. And that was where I kind of fell between two lines there of what was right and what was wrong as it related to safety, because I always held the professionalism of being a professional diver as our job is produce. That's why we made the money we made. And there were times when it just was unsafe and everybody get together and say job shut down because it's unsafe. And divers took care of divers that way and all. But I really lost touch with the industry, and I don't know how productive comparative to how it was 24 years ago it's gotten or not gotten.
Well,
and
divers ain't lasting as long either.
Right.
Like I dove, when I came down here I was 27 and they told me, oh, you're too old.
Right. Yeah.
Well,
It was hard to get into it unless you was a service guy.
I was in shape and I stayed
Yeah.
in shape.
Right.
And where most guys, once they became a diver, they weren't picked. You
Yeah.
used to pick the
Yeah.
employees.
Yeah.
There wasn't no winches. There was how many sandbags did you haul?
Oh my God.
And fill up nets full of them, you know, instead of being packaged up, and they pick it up with a crane and said, oh no, you know.
Times have changed, no doubt.
Times have
No
changed.
doubt. Well,
Good
look,
to see you again, Sonny.
nice to visit with you and all. And I appreciate people like yourself consistently coming out to these. And I don't know what we can do as a nucleus of a group to get more challenging to all the people we know that's never been to one of these, that's made their living in the industry, that are now out of it. The camaraderie, the appreciation for the years and days that we all work together as an industry, and yet it's very hard to get people to come to these kind of
You know what
events.
this thing pays for? It pays for a couple of scholarships over at that school.
Yeah,
Kids don't have
exactly
the
right.
money to go.
Right.
And I love that school here in Morgan
Yeah.
City because it teaches basics.
Right.
Ground
level, get started.
Basics,
Yeah.
you know. Thank you.
Well,
Appreciate it.
nice visiting with you.